All right, so the Boston Tea Party. Everyone's seen the pictures, right? Colonists in disguise, tossing tea into the harbor. But there's so much more to it when you really dig in. It wasn't just a symbolic act, it was a huge turning point.
It really was. I mean, think about it. That one night in 1773 set the stage for the entire American Revolution. And for this deep dive, we're going beyond the surface.
Exactly. We're going to really unpack it. We've got your sources here, and they cover everything.
Yeah, we've got the background, the events of the night itself, the reactions, and the long-term impact. It's all here.
And we're going to synthesize all of that to figure out why this protest still resonates so strongly today, over 250 years later.
It's fascinating, really.
So let's dive in, starting with the context. What led up to this? What were the seeds of rebellion?
Well, you have to go back to the aftermath of the 7 Years' War. Britain was in a tough spot financially. It was a costly war, and they needed money.
And they saw the American colonies as a way to get it.
Exactly. Mercantilism was the prevailing economic theory at the time, and that meant the colonies were seen as existing to benefit the mother country.
Which naturally led to tension. You can't talk about the Boston Tea Party without talking about taxation, without representation. It became the rallying cry of the colonists.
Absolutely. They felt they were being dictated to without having a say in Parliament.
And we see this play out with the Sugar Act and the Stamp Act.
Both of which were deeply resented by the colonists.
And it wasn't just about the money itself.
No, it was about a fundamental principle, consent.
The idea that you shouldn't be taxed by a government you have no voice in.
Exactly. The colonists felt their rights as Englishmen were being violated. Now, the Tea Act of 1773, this is where things get really interesting.
Because on the surface, it seemed like a good deal for the colonists. The British East India Company was struggling, and the Tea Act allowed them to sell directly to the colonies, cutting out the middlemen and lowering the price of tea.
Right, cheaper tea.
But the colonists saw right through it.
Oh, absolutely. They understood that this was about much more than just the price of tea. They saw it as a blatant attempt by Parliament to assert its right to tax them without their consent.
So even though tea was cheaper, they weren't having it.
Nope. They weren't going to be tricked into accepting the principle of taxation without representation, no matter how good the deal seemed. And there was another layer to this, too.
That's that.
The Tea Act was also a way for Britain to establish a direct economic link with the colonies, bypassing the colonial merchants.
Who were becoming increasingly influential and powerful.
Exactly. And many of them were actively opposing British policies. So the Tea Act threatened not just their livelihoods, but their political power as well.
It's all connected.
It is. So you have this situation where tensions are already high, and then the tea ships arrive in Boston Harbor.
With Governor Hutchinson refusing to send them back.
Right. He insisted on unloading the tea. And that's when the Sons of Liberty stepped in.
This is where things start to heat up.
Yeah.
Tell us about the Sons of Liberty.
They were a well-organized group, a bit secretive, dedicated to resisting British policies.
And Samuel Adams was a key figure, wasn't he?
Absolutely. He was a brilliant agitator and organizer, a master of propaganda. He really whipped up public opinion against the Tea Act.
And then there's this iconic image of the colonists disguised as Mohawk Indians. Why that specific disguise?
Well, it was a powerful symbol. It was a way for them to reject their British identity and embrace something new, something distinctly American. Of course, today we recognize the problematic aspect of this.
Right, the appropriation of Native American culture.
It's a reminder of the complex relationship between colonists and indigenous peoples at the time. The colonists were using Native American imagery for their own purposes, while often ignoring the actual concerns and sovereignty of Native Americans. It's a complicated legacy.
Absolutely. So let's talk about the night itself, December 16th, 1773. What actually happened?
A group of over 100 men, disguised as Mohawk Indians, boarded the 3 ships docked in Boston Harbor, the Dartmouth, the Eleanor, and the Beaver, and they proceeded to systematically destroy the cargo of tea.
How much tea are we talking about?
They dumped 342 chests of tea into the harbor, totaling around 92,000 pounds.
Wow, that's a lot of tea.
It was a huge amount, worth millions of dollars in today's money. But what's also striking is the precision of the act. It was non-violent.
They didn't harm the ships or the crew?
No.
Yeah.
They were very specific in their target. The tea, and only the tea. It was a deliberate act of defiance aimed at a very specific symbol of British authority.
So what was the reaction like?
Well, it was mixed, of course. For many colonists, it was a moment of celebration. They saw it as a bold act of resistance against tyranny. It really galvanized opposition to British rule.
But not everyone was on board.
Right. Some colonists were more cautious, worried about the potential repercussions. Some merchants were concerned about the economic fallout. And then there were the loyalists, who remained loyal to the crown and condemned the act as vandalism.
Even Benjamin Franklin, who was generally supportive of colonial rights, suggested the colonists should reimburse the East India Company for the tea.
He did. He saw it as a matter of principle, of upholding the law. But overall, the Boston Tea Party had a huge impact on public opinion, both in the colonies and in Britain.
And the British government's reaction was swift and severe.
Oh, absolutely. They saw it as an intolerable act of rebellion, a direct challenge to their authority. And they responded with the Coercive Acts of 1774, which the colonists quickly dubbed the Intolerable Acts.
These were clearly meant to punish Massachusetts.
They were. The Boston Port Act closed the harbor to all trade until the tea was paid for.
Right, which basically crippled the city's economy.
Right. And the Massachusetts Government Act stripped the colony of much of its self-governing power, placing it more directly under British control. The Administration of Justice Act made it so British officials accused of crimes in the colonies could be tried in Britain.
Basically allowing them to escape accountability.
Pretty much. And then there was the Quartering Act, which allowed British troops to be housed in private homes without the owner's consent.
So these acts were meant to isolate and punish Massachusetts, but it seems they had the opposite effect on the other colonies.
You're right. Instead of intimidating the other colonies, the coercive acts actually pushed them closer together. They saw what was happening to Massachusetts and recognized that their own liberties were at stake.
So the Tea Party, in a way, became a catalyst for greater colonial unity.
Exactly. And it led directly to the First Continental Congress in 1774, where representatives from 12 of the 13 colonies met to discuss a unified response to British policies.
So we see this event focused on a single shipment of tea having these huge ripple effects. It really escalated the conflict with Britain.
It did. It's difficult to say if war was inevitable at that point, but the Boston Tea Party and the subsequent British response certainly pushed things in that direction. Tensions continued to rise, and within a year, the first shots were fired at Lexington and Concord.
And 2 years later, the colonies declared their independence.
It's remarkable how an event centered on tea could have such profound consequences, shaping the course of history.
It's a testament to the power of symbols, and the Boston Tea Party has become a truly iconic symbol of resistance and self-determination.
It resonates deeply within the American narrative.
And its influence extends even to modern times. The Tea Party movement of the 21st century, for example, explicitly invoked this historical event in its name and rhetoric.
It's a reminder that history continues to inform and inspire political movements and debates, even centuries later.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are the key takeaways from the Boston Tea Party? What should our listeners really remember?
I think the biggest takeaway is the power of unified action. The colonists were able to achieve something truly remarkable by coming together and standing up for their principles.
Even though they were facing a powerful empire.
Exactly. They believed in their cause, and they were willing to take a stand, even if it meant sacrificing their comfort and security. And that's something we can all learn from.
Absolutely. The Boston Tea Party is a reminder that ordinary people can make a difference when they stand up for what they believe in. And it's a reminder that even seemingly small acts of defiance can have huge consequences.
It's a story about courage, conviction, and the power of collective action. It's a story that continues to inspire and challenge us today.
So we started this deep dive wanting to understand why the Boston Tea Party still matters today. And I think we've found our answer. It's a story about standing up for what you believe in, even when the odds are stacked against you.
And it's a reminder that those seemingly small acts of defiance can sometimes spark revolutions.
It's a story that continues to resonate, reminding us that we all have a role to play in shaping the course of history.
And that's something worth thinking about. What are the issues that we're facing today that require us to take a stand? What are the tea parties of our time? And how can we, as individuals and as a society, work together to create a more just and equitable world? Those are the questions I hope our listeners will take away from this deep dive.
Powerful questions indeed. And on that note, we'll leave you to ponder them. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the Boston Tea Party. It's been a fascinating journey.
It has. Until next time.